Good afternoon, everyone. My name is George Corton, Chief Development Officer at the FIU Foundation. And as a proud Cuban-American, welcome to Philanthropy and Giving in the Cuban-American community. I hope you all have your cafecito in hand. I will have mine after the introduction. First, Ana Mari, Melissa, and Tony, welcome and thank you for sharing your time with us today, and more importantly, your stories. We're delighted to have you participate in a conversation that we at the FIU Foundation believe is so important: the role of Hispanics in philanthropy, but more specifically today, the role of Cuban-American in our philanthropy in our community. As an anchor institution in an urban city such as ours, FIU's Casa Cuba and FIU's College of Business are the ideal partners to join forces in leading this important conversation. As some of you may know, Casa Cuba is a historic initiative at FIU to develop a leading cultural center and think tank for the study of Cuba and the celebration and preservation of our Cuban heritage. Casa Cuba has secured a prominent site at the entrance of FIU's main campus to build an iconic facility and receive significant philanthropic support from the National Endowment for the Humanities and the Knight Foundation. Our future home will feature galleries for interactive exhibits, classrooms to teach FIU's more than 70 courses on Cuba, and a state-of-the-art venue for events, artistic performances, and dynamic programming. This will be the home that our community has yearned for decades. And as I say, if not us, who? And if not now, when? Also, as a graduate at the FIU College of Business, I am proud to share that on Monday, yes, this Monday, our undergraduate international business program was ranked #2 in US World News and Report. So congratulations, Dean Lee and the entire College of Business team. Our students are also making a huge impact nationally and internationally. Our chapter of the Association of Latino Professionals for America has been named the organization's 2020 National Chapter of the Year. This is just to name a long list of accolades that the College of Business has received in just the past year. All who are attending today will receive additional information after our talk on how to get involved with the historic Casa Cuba project in our College of Business. I'd like to now kick off our discussion by introducing our moderator and amazing panelists. Leading our conversation today is Ana Mari Aguilagos. She is the president and CEO of Hispanics in Philanthropy, which she is guiding with a bold vision to usher in a new generation of philanthropy that is for, by, and about the Latino community. Under her leadership, HIP has spearheaded rapid responses to the biggest challenges facing Latinos today. Ana Mari is an entrepreneurial thinker, bridging diverse agendas with a track record of working within the philanthropic, public, and nonprofit sectors. She has held prestigious leadership roles at the Ford Foundation, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, and NYU's Wagner School of Public Service. Ana Mari currently serves on the board at Foundation Center and Rockefeller Philanthropic Advisors. She received her master's degree in public administration from Harvard and her bachelor's degree in international relations from American University. Next, our panelist. A native to Miami, Florida, Melissa Medina Jimenez is currently president of eMERGE Americas, the premier technology event of the Americas. The mission of eMERGE Americas is to serve as a catalyst for establishing Miami as the tech hub of the Americas. Melissa is also the president of the Medina Family Foundation, which has a mission to fund local initiatives that focus on mentoring children and empowering families by enhancing education and quality of life. Most recently, Melissa was named by the South Florida Business Journal as one of the 2019 Power Leaders in Technology. Melissa also sits on the board of Endeavor Miami, Babson WinLab, and Roots of Hope. Most importantly, Melissa is a mother and most passionate about her 5 children. The Medina family have been generous supporters of our own FIU. Thanks to them, we have the world's only undersea research laboratory, the Medina Aquarius Program, dedicated to the study and preservation of marine ecosystems. And last, but definitely not least, our very own Tony Argiz. As the chairman and CEO of Morrison Brown Argiz and Farah since 1997, Tony has led their growth to becoming one of the top 40 accounting firms in the United States. Over the last 40 years, Tony has developed extensive in-depth knowledge and experience in practices involving audits, business planning, economic damages, fraud examinations, valuations, and litigation cases. He is known for his many civic affiliations and extraordinary community leadership. Currently, Tony serves as the chairman of our very own Adrian R. Center. He has been named in the top 100 power leaders of South Florida Business Journal for the last 8 consecutive years. He has been named in the 500 most influential business leaders by Florida Trend for the last 2 years. And he is the most recent recipient of the Sand in My Shoes Award by the Greater Miami Chamber of Commerce 2019. His list of civic engagements and awards are far too long to share in this abbreviated introduction, but among all his accolades, we are most proud to call Tony an alumnus of RFIU and to have honored him with the prestigious Torch Award, the highest honor granted to an alumni of our institution. Tony also played on our baseball team, but I won't say the year. Tony and his firm, MBAF, have also been longtime supporters of RFIU, an incredible 40-year history of philanthropy to our institution. And most recently, the Argy's family established the Argy's Family Scholarship, providing full tuition scholarships to our business students. So without further ado, Ana Mari.
Hello, good morning, everybody. Can you hear me well?
I can hear you.
Great. And then there we have Tony. And then there we have Melissa. Well, welcome this morning. Thank you, George, for that very generous introduction. Congrats on all the accolades that the school is getting. It's fantastic to hear. Thank you for inviting me. We gotta say thank you to Casa Cuba, FIU, the business school, the South Florida Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, the Greater Miami Chamber of Commerce. The vision to put this together was there, and we're very excited. As president and CEO of Hispanics in Philanthropy, I'm very excited to be having this conversation. It's right up my alley. Our work is about convening, it's about connecting, it's about leveraging, it's about getting dollars out into the communities, both to the nonprofits, and now I should say that we're getting money out to our small businesses, our Latino small businesses, which are in danger of not surviving, and they are really the infrastructure and the foundation for our communities and how intergenerational wealth goes forward. So I'm super excited about this conversation with Tony and with Melissa, and it's going to be great. I also wanted to say that I have a personal interest in this conversation because I too am a daughter of Miami. And so I was there in the 70s and the 80s. I was telling George that I went to FIU for 1 semester, and it was really, really formative. And it was so exciting to be at a school where folks understood the Cuban, the immigrant experience, and you didn't have to always be explaining, and we could talk about things in intersectional ways. I was there for Mariel. I was there for the night that the Liberty City riots, when we could see the skyline burning. And so the Miami has just come so far, and it's just an amazing place. And it's because we had faith in the collective power of our gente, right? In what we could do together, and the generosity that our people really exemplified early on and through to this day. And so it's that generosity and that giving that we're going to talk about today. I'm excited because the generosity of the Latino community and even the Cuban community is not measured, it's not studied enough. So people overlook it and say, oh, it's not happening, but it's happening. It's just happening in different ways. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So let's kick off with our first question, and let's talk about giving. Among Cuban immigrants, there's a lot of donors that have become really forces in giving and in charity in Miami, but really the repercussions of the giving is all across the country and all across the Americas. So I'd love to talk, Tony and Melissa, a little bit about your own giving and how you define philanthropy from your perspective. Melissa, why don't we start with you?
Sure. Thanks, Ana Mari. Also want to take this time to thank George for the intro. I want to thank all of the FIU family who's just been extremely supportive of all of our efforts through Emerge Americas. Dr. Rosenberg has been an incredible supporter. And I want to specifically thank Lily Space for this opportunity, and Maria Carla, both from Casa Cuba as well. It's really exciting to be here and very humbled to share this virtual stage with you, Ana Mari, and of course with Tony Argy's, who, is a legend really, not only in Miami, but across the nation. So thank you for this opportunity. But to answer your question, Ana Mari, what does philanthropy mean to me? I think philanthropy to everyone is rather personal. My story is I'm a Cuban-American, born and raised right here in Miami, Florida. And I grew up listening to the struggles that both of my parents faced and their families when they had to suddenly leave their country and enter a new country, not knowing the language. And as a mom of 5 young children, I can't even fathom having to go through that right now. I wouldn't know where to start, where to begin, going to a new country, not having anything. And so that is definitely part of my foundation. And it also helps me define philanthropy, because no matter the struggles that my parents went through, they always taught us to give back, no matter how little or how much we did or didn't have. And that's sort of ingrained in both myself and my brother, and just always giving from a place of gratitude, being thankful. And so that's how I personally define philanthropy.
Thank you. Tony, what about you?
Thank you, Ana Mari. And again, thank you, George, for that introduction. Maria Carla for the invitation, our great president, Rosenberg, and obviously Dean Lee from the School of Business. And thank you, Melissa. I only try to follow in the footsteps of your family and the work that you all have done in Miami and everywhere else. But, philanthropy, to me, I guess my experience coming to the U.S. as by myself without my parents, I was age of 9. Thank God for the Catholic Church. They were there to greet me and take care of me for 5 years. And I'll never forget that. And as I was lucky enough to move to Miami, I grew up in Tampa, Florida. And in Miami, I came to FIU on a baseball scholarship, and also lucky enough to meet my wife, Conchi, who was in education, the education school, and we've been married for 44 years. In 97, I became CEO of Morrison Brown Argees and Fair, a firm that I've been working with for 43 years. And, philanthropy really just means making a meaningful impact in the community. And that's what I always tell our people and our team, where you or your business are located. And we always try to do that by getting involved in many organizations in Miami. It's really about giving back the same way that my experiences in life, I saw people helping me to get up and running for the 5 years that I was without my parents, and I'll never forget that.
So giving back, helping, it's characteristic of Latinos, of Hispanics, of our culture, of our families, but we don't think about it as philanthropy. We don't think of remittances as philanthropy. How did you learn about philanthropy? How did you learn about formal, institutionalized philanthropy? Was it in your families or was it afterwards?
For me, it was definitely learned from my family. I think it started off maybe not as formal and organized, but there was always sort of a sense of philanthropy and giving in my family. And both of my parents were always very grateful, and they would always say over and over to us of how lucky in particular that they landed in Miami in the US. We live in a democratic country, and it's a land of opportunity, and they truly take that to heart, and they expect us to take that to heart as well. It didn't become more formalized till I was a little bit older, but I think the root of philanthropy was always there. Maybe it wasn't as formal, but we always spoke about it, and it was just
Let me push you, Melissa. When did you learn about the formal side of philanthropy?
I learned about the formal side probably into my teenage years, when we started formalizing more of a family foundation and became a nonprofit, and later on I became president of our family foundation. And I realized, how much impact potentially our dollars can have in certain organizations, and getting more formally involved in organizations also, whether it's through board seats or just being more active of a member in each of these organizations. So I would say in my mid to later teenage years, but again, it was always part of the conversation growing up.
Mm-hmm. And do you remember why your family decided to do, instead of giving, right, doing a lot of checks, doing the foundation?
I think it was about making that impact last as long as possible, and almost like this generational effect as well, making sure that we would be able to make those dollars have as much impact as possible. And I think we realized that if we did formalize it through a nonprofit, a 501c3, that we would be able to do that. But that doesn't in any way diminish the fact that giving personally through your own philanthropic efforts is just as great as well.
Absolutely. I was just curious why the shift. Yeah. Thank you. Tony, what about you?
Well, you were right, Ana Maria, in that, Spaniards or Hispanics have always taken care of their family, and that never was really considered philanthropy. But, I learned it at a young age. I came to this country without my parents. The Catholic Church took care of me for 5 years. They helped many others. And then, when I joined our firm back in 1977, I saw it was the firm at the time was not Hispanic. I was one of the only Hispanics there. We were only 14 at the time, but I learned from the Jewish partners at the firm. It was a totally Jewish firm at the time that, how they took care of the community. One of our founding partners was vice chair and was on the board of FIU forever. And these were the people that I learned from, how they took care of B'nai B'rith Federation, all those organizations. So when I had the experience and the expertise, I went out to the community and tried to make an impact. And that's what I tell our people.
That's fantastic. So I'm understanding what shaped your perceptions and goes into your philanthropy. How would you describe Cuban-American philanthropy today?
I would say it's still very personal. I think sort of how I started in the beginning. I think it's still very relationship based. I think Cubans and Cuban-Americans are that way innately. So I believe that it's a lot based on the relationships that you make, help define what you might invest your money in for philanthropic efforts.
Tony, would you agree or would you?
No, definitely. And, keep in mind that most Cubans came here in the 60s and, later arrivals, they had to build capital. The families had to build capital, meaning it's first generation in the United States. But I think, nowadays the businesses that have been built, the networks that have been built in the community and all, I think the community's ready for leadership. And, hopefully it's like the Medina Foundation and Mike Fernandez and these individuals that lead the charge, and people learn from that and see how important it is. And I would think, FIU, without FIU, Miami would not be what it is. It's probably graduated. You go to a bank, you go to a law firm, you go to an accounting firm, and I bet you 80% or more of the people are from FIU. And education for us Cuban Americans has always been critical. So I think it's just a common sense thing they give to education. And hopefully it'll really start blossoming.
Absolutely. I remember my grandma always saying, education is the only thing that nobody can take away from you, because, right? They
Absolutely.
Their
my parents would tell me that all the time too. The time.
I've emphasized that to my daughter as well. Education, what's in your head, nobody can take that away. So what are the causes that our gente are investing in and that are providing dollars for? Is it education? Are there other causes that our Hispanic community is giving to?
I think so. I think probably immigration for sure is one of the top ones, I would say. I think personally for our family, and I see it amongst other Cuban Americans and Cuban families, is sort of giving back to youth, both on and off the island. There's an organization that I'm on the board of called Roots of Hope, Raíces de Esperanza, that's their specific mission. And it was co-founded actually by my husband and his best friend almost 20 years ago. And I think people are very passionate about giving back specifically to youth to empower them. Mm-hmm. And I also think arts and culture, it's just a big part of the Cuban and Cuban-American life and lifestyle. So I think those are probably, and of course, education, as Tony mentioned, hands down, and Ana Maria, as you mentioned, because my grandparents drilled that in my head as well. Mm-hmm. Getting your college degree was extremely important. No one could take that away from you.
Yeah, I see those as well. I mean, we have the Perez Museum, which is amazing and is such an attraction there in Miami. But George was telling me that none of our universities have like names of Latinos, like the buildings. Is there a disconnect there? Are we funding like early education in high schools, or I mean, what kind of education do you see us funding? Do either of you? I'm just curious if either of you.
I mean, I think at the college level, both the FIU and the University of Miami have received significant funding from Hispanics over the years.
Okay.
You know, and FIU, when you talk about buildings, you have the Cejas building, you have, you know, I can't recall all of them, but there's a, you know, number of buildings there that, but, you know, again, like Melissa, I agree with her. Immigration, I mean, that's really important, I think, for us Hispanics to help others that are in need through immigration, education. Like you all said, I mean, my parents would tell me that too. We all left Cuba, we left our belongings there, but our knowledge was not left behind, and we were able to use it to build our better lives here in the United States. Like Melissa said, arts and culture, the PAM, the Arts Center is I mean, even for, I mean, now you know, they bring all kinds of Hispanic performances there. And I think it's critical to get involved in communities that really need help, because that's what America is all about. And you need to help all the communities, because, you know, we're all a team, we're all Americans, and we need to help each other.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Ana Maria, if I could add just one more thing. Sorry, I was just going to say one. I think that was mentioned a little earlier on, but I think it's still very relevant to this day. And Tony mentioned how much support he got from the Catholic Church when he came to Miami. I would say religious institutions as well, and giving are a big part of Cuban and Cuban-American efforts. And I think that's, you know, many families are just rooted in their faith. And I think that many families, like Tony's family, that were given so much from the church, that never leaves them. And so when they're able to give back in a significant way, I think that's probably another area that is a big focus for the Latinos, and specifically for Cubans.
No,
Thank you for adding that. That's really important.
The church does raise about $12 million a year for charity in the community. And I mean, keep in mind, that all comes, the majority, from the Hispanic community, because that's who the majority of the Catholics are.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, absolutely. So we've talked about youth, arts and culture, education, immigration, religious institutions. Most of this is from the perspective of philanthropy, like services. I'm thinking is what this is, direct services that is having an impact on communities, on people today and tomorrow, and on the broader. Do you see that Hispanics are investing in what we would call movement building, power building, influence, organizing, that part of the work that nonprofits do, that is more about influencing systems? Or is that not not where we are yet because we have so many needs that are affecting our communities today. I'm talking about that because I'm trying to figure out the intersection between the trends in Cuban giving and the pressing challenges that we're seeing, which like the pandemic, the economic disparity, like 90% of our businesses were not able to apply and get the PPP loans, right? I think 30% of our Hispanic businesses have closed already. How we've been impacted by the pandemic at disproportionate rates. So I'm trying to understand the intersection between direct services and systems change, which is for the next generation. Thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's absolutely an intersection between trends in Cuban giving and the most pressing challenges today, you know, even in our current environment. You could link, you just mentioned income disparities. I think opportunity for all is a big concern overall as a system. And, you know, no matter what skin color, race, et cetera, and clearly those issues are still happening today in our country. And, you know, going back to immigration and social injustices as well, I think there's clearly, a thread between all of those. So absolutely, to me, there's clear intersections between both of those.
Tony, what would you?
Meaning, I mean, definitely investing in social justice and the communities that need it. And like you said, whether Hispanics or the African-American community, but those are the communities that most need the help, and I mean, it just comes from your heart, you know, if you're really a Catholic, you believe in those social justice issues. And I've always had that in the back of my mind and told our team at the firm, you know, it's places like the Coconut Grove, the West Grove, that the entire Grove is growing, but the West Grove, I mean, there's a lot of people that are in need there. And these are the communities, or Liberty City in Miami, or Little Havana, that still has become a place for immigrants and where they go attend school. And any of those organizations that focus on it, it's something critical.
We have some questions, so I'm going to start interweaving them.
Okay.
What is the Cuban experience, and how is the Cuban experience different from giving outside of Miami?
Can you repeat that?
It's from George Foyo, and he's asking, what is the Cuban experience and how is it different from parts of the country outside of Miami?
Oh, got it. So the Cuban experience, I think Tony can probably answer this better than me, since he really lived that Cuban experience, being uprooted from, you know, his home and his country of origin. But I have to imagine that Cuban experience, whether you're in Miami or in New York or in other parts of the country, that's still part of you forever. And I assume that experience, no matter where you are geographically, is going to affect you, your family, and who you become.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and obviously the Cuban experience, it's so critical in Miami, but, you know, we as Cubans, I'm proud to say that, I mean, look at Texas, we have a U.S. Senator. Look at New Jersey, we have a U.S. Senator, not only in Florida. I mean, other than the Jews, you know, I think in the U.S. Senate, we're probably better represented than any other group. And, you know, but outside of Miami, it's a lot tougher to make an impact because, I mean, Cubans are over probably 50 or 60% of Miami-Dade County. So the experience and the impact is always going to be greater here.
Yeah, I think that I agree with both of you. I would add, it's also very relational in the Hispanic community, in other Hispanic communities. If you go to El Paso, if you go to New York, if you go to Los Angeles, and the emphasis is on the youth because our community does see the promise of our children and our grandchildren and the legacy. And so there's a lot of giving that's going to make sure that our youth have everything that they need to have that platform of opportunity. And I would say, immigration, especially after the past several years where people were seeing kids in cages small businesses to make sure that there's an opportunities for small businesses to get started. And lastly, I would add there's a lot around remittances that is also philanthropy because it's helping others. The thing is that our philanthropy is not studied. And so I think that there's a big gap there. And so we have a question here from Leopoldo Coronado, and he wants to know, do you follow any specific approach when you're thinking about impact, when you're thinking about how to measure or quantify your social investments? How do you approach that? How do you know that your investments as donors, as philanthropists, are actually having the impact that they're supposed to?
You can only, I mean, the impact, it's amazing. As a donor and someone that gives you time to an organization, I've been involved with an all women's school in Coconut Grove, and I was there when it, not when it was started, but it started in '83. My daughter started studying there, and I'm still involved. And I mean, to see that school, the balance sheet to grow the way it has, and buildings and properties, you know, as a contributor and someone giving your time, you can't, you know, it's such a payback to see your work and your donations build something that's going to be lasting forever. Hopefully, if we can keep sea level rise out of Miami, but you know, it's wonderful. Or an organization that I've been involved in the West Grove for 20 years, and I got involved because they needed to turn it around, and I was able to do it along with the help of other board members. And today it sits strong, and it helps a community of less fortunate. And those are the things that, I mean, it really is an amazing return on your heart. Maybe not a return on investment, but your heart and you know, as a Catholic, I feel great by being able to do that.
Great. So you're not looking at metrics on a spreadsheet. You're looking at the impact with your eyes. You're going to the site visits and seeing what's happening. Yep.
I would say definitely being very hands-on with who you're giving to or the organization you're giving to. And I think also, at least for myself and my family, just having a very clear vision as well of what's important to you. For us, it's very clear. We want to empower women, we want to empower youth, we want to empower entrepreneurs, and we just want to make sure we're very aligned in what we feel would be the greatest impact to our community. We're also very focused on giving in the community that's just been so good to myself and to my family, and to Cuba, the island itself, the people there. So we're very focused, and I think going back to those relationships, it's creating trust between yourself and the organization that you're giving to, always open lines of communications, and not having these crazy expectations. But I think, you know, like what Tony was saying, just being able to see that you have made a difference, whether it's, you know, measured in metrics in a spreadsheet. I think it's much deeper and much more than that.
Yeah, I think that the field is really shifting, because before it was all about seeing with your own eyes, and then we had this flip to everything has to be quantified and just spreadsheets, and that's just very, very hard on nonprofits that are doing the work all the time, and they're also spending weeks developing reports. It's very hard to do the work.
Yeah, I agree.
I would to see that we're coming to the middle, and it's a combination of.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think there has to be sort of a balance too. For example, when nonprofits or when organizations issue like matching grants and stuff like that, that's something that we get very excited about, because we realize that we're gonna quite literally be able to double the impact monetarily. Mm-hmm. And so there is some of that goes into it as well.
Mm-hmm. I have a question that was asked by two people, Vicky Lopez and Lily Betancourt. They're very related, so I'm going to ask them together. One is, how is the best way for nonprofits to approach prospective Cuban-American donors? And linked to that is, there are so many worthy causes, right? And so how do you determine where you deploy your philanthropic dollars? And you've talked a little bit about it. It's like what's related to the issues that you've already scoped out: youth, women, entrepreneurs, education. But besides that, is there any other lens that you bring to the work? Because there are more organizations than you can reach.
Yeah, I would say that when I started more formally getting involved in philanthropic organizations, I quickly realized that there are hundreds, if not thousands, of nonprofits just even right here, just in South Florida, and they are all doing incredible work. It's actually very difficult to figure out, where you want to invest in. But that's why I said earlier that if you're very sort of clear with your mission and your goal, it makes it a little more simple to kind of hone in on what you're passionate about and what you would like to give back to and what makes the most sense to you. And what was the other question?
I think it's related. It's how do you choose from all of the worthy?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And what is the best way for these
that
organizations to reach you? Like
to
sell themselves, to be able to pitch to you.
Yeah, for me, it's just reach out via either email or social media. Nowadays there's direct message on all social media platforms, which my generation and a lot more of the millennials is not a millennial, but I missed it by a year. But it's just an easy way to reach out. And I think through personal relationships as well, that's another way. But I would say just not to be afraid to reach out.
To be persistent. Great.
Yeah.
Tony, what would you answer to this question?
I would agree. It really, the persistency of the organization and then making sure that, as a giver, that you're focused on what you really care about: education, the arts, social justice. These are some of the items. So, it's either through the firm or myself, but there's limited funds always, but you try to do the best that you can.
Thanks. So Jesus Hernandez is asking if you are working with young Cubans that are more recent arrivals, and in particular, is there any scope of work and investment in the arts and culture within this Cuban community? So the more recent arrivals of the young Cubanos.
Sure. So for us, absolutely. And I think when I sort of touched upon Raíces de Esperanza, and that's youth on the island and also youth that arrive to the States. So that's how I work with Cuban youth that have arrived here through them, but also through my work at Emerge Americas. We have given a lot of opportunity to specifically Cuban entrepreneurs that arrive here with an idea, and we mentor them. We invite them to be part of our startup program. And we've also actually invited Cuban entrepreneurs from the island as well that have come to Miami and been able to go through our program. So yes, I definitely, it's very important to me and to my family to help give innovative tools to Cuban youth specifically. They're all just like Cubans. They have this resiliency in their DNA, and they're masterful at putting things together and very creative. And so we want to be able to help flourish that.
Great. I'm going to layer on another question, Tony, related, which is, given that there's several waves of Cubans coming to the US, the 60s, Mariel, the Balseros, over the last 60 years now, are there significant differences that you have seen, since you've seen all of these different waves, in terms of the integration into American culture, into education, and into wealth attainment? And this is from George Pollo.
We're all brothers and sisters, and there's no difference between the ones that came here in the 60s, that came in Mariel, or came in after. I think, some of the ones that came in later in the last 10 years or so, unfortunately, don't have the experience in the whole Spanish culture or hard work that that some of us have, but they're succeeding and they're getting an education and they're overcoming all the thoughts that the Cuban government gave them, or, you know, how to survive. You know, they understand it's different here, and there's so many that have done so well and are continuing through education or whatever. We're all brothers and sisters. It doesn't really matter when we got here. You know, obviously the first influx of Cubans were better prepared because, I mean, it just worked out that way between the education and all. But people from Mariel have done so well here in Miami, the adaptation, and later arrivals. I mean, they're doing the same thing we did in the 60s, working odd jobs, you know, trying to build capital. And, you know, they all have that Cuban heart and the Cuban, you know, that Cuban beat in them that somehow, you know, they manage to survive and grow.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. We have John McIntyre on the line. So we have a question about Cuba. And let me find it. I lost it a second ago. Well, as you all know, John runs Cuba-Emprende. So he's wondering if there are different attitudes that you perceive regarding funding in Cuba. And for example, besides Cuba-Emprende, there's Caritas, my friend Mauricio's there now, Knights of Malta, and they're supporting tens of thousands of people on the island, entrepreneurship, housing, not a big amount given the needs and the impact. But what do you think about funding in Cuba? Have you seen that interest in that growing or flat or other?
So I'll answer. I think it's a very sensitive topic, and I understand where there is, I guess, maybe controversy is not the right word, but where there's issues that people feel with donating to organizations that are helping on the island. But, you know, I speak from just a personal perspective, and from our family, we invest in both, and we believe it's extremely important to do so. I think making sure, and at least trying as much as possible to know who you're working with and about them and the organization, specifically when you're giving to efforts on the island, is extremely important. But I do think, just like many other topics within the Cuban community, I think it's a very personal and sensitive sort of discussion. But, you know, just being transparent here and being as honest as I can be. For us, we, as a family, we do believe it's extremely important and do work with organizations that help directly on the island.
Tony, any thoughts?
Yeah, I totally agree with Melissa, whether it's Caritas and all the different things that they do there through the different communities and helping the older Cubans through Emprende with John and Mike and various other people. That, I mean, it is a sensitive subject, but some of these people that they're helping, they're doing it also through the church. And these are people that could make a difference in the future. You know, they have nothing to do with what happened with the revolution. It's not their fault. You know, and they need the help and they need the assistance to take it to another level if they can. But, you know, the remittances to Cuba, I think, are enormous. It must be probably the largest importer of, you know, of funds in terms of the total economy there. Whatever monies are receiving remittances from Miami or the United States.
Agreed.
Great. We haven't talked about climate and the environment. Tony, you talked a little bit about it. How do we save Miami? My own mom is there in Coral Gables, and you know, you just dig a foot, water comes up. How does the Cuban-American community see the problems related to climate and the environment? And this is from Sofia Leon.
I mean, I think at this time, you know, I remember when I was chair of the chamber, my two goals were transportation and sea level change. And that was back in 2011. I think, you know, some of the people involved in in the whole process on the environment here. There's a lot of Cuban Americans. I don't think it's caught into the Cuban community as important of an issue as it is. I mean, all you got to do is look at the fires out in California and Oregon and all, and you know, look at the red tide here in Miami Beach and in parts of Miami. You know, in my own community, I see it. I mean, just a huge rain floods the entire community, and it's a real big issue, and people are going to have to start really focusing on that, because it's our future in Miami. I mean, they're talking about building a wall 8 or 9 foot tall, the federal government in parts of the area, but you know, I don't know if that can really do the job. I think it's going to be conservation and really thinking like the Dutch to be able to put it together in a small place like Miami.
Absolutely. I know that when Javier Soto was the president of the Miami-Dade Community Foundation, he was emphasizing this, and I hope that it continues. Melissa, from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that I'm extremely passionate about. I think the environment needs to be top of mind if we're looking to, I'm thinking of my children and their future. I think through, you know, our family's relationship with FIU and FIU Aquarius, that's one way, and you might not see the direct line there, but believe it or not, it is the only underwater sea laboratory, and it actually helps the marine life from having to get scooped up and having to, you know, then be examined, etc., where these aquanauts, as we call them, are able to study marine life from underground. And it's something that, you know, my brother and I, my family, we grew up on the water, in the ocean, and we're extremely, extremely passionate about the environment. I think I saw quickly now on the chat that somebody mentioned Andrew Otasso, who is a young Cuban-American in Miami who is doing incredible things for the environment. I mean, he quite literally picks up trash along the coast of Key Biscayne and has walked with it for miles and is constantly pushing the envelope when it comes to awareness of all the issues that we're facing specifically here in South Florida. So yes, I mean, we're very tuned into it, and we understand that this could be, you know, a major, major issue.
Wondering if you all collaborate with other philanthropic entities or other donors. This is from Ana Martinez. What does collaboration and partnership look like?
I mean, definitely, I myself through United Way, you know, I used to head up United Way, and it's just a great organization because it raises money for so many causes that it's an amazing way to give money.
Big fan of the United Way.
Yes.
Yeah, we definitely do the same. And I mentioned a little bit about those matching grants. And when we do those, it's always in coordination with another organization and seeing, you know, how can we create more impact together. And I think that's something that I would actually love to see more of in South Florida, is kind of that relationship building between nonprofits. I think there's a little bit of a disconnect sometimes. And I think if more of the nonprofits were able to come together and work together, that the impact would multiply. But it's definitely part of our efforts and how we run our foundation.
Great. Javier Romani is talking about an organization that he represents, Peers with Disabilities Across South Florida. So we haven't talked about folks with different abilities and how we can best work with them. We also haven't talked about Cubans of different racial backgrounds, right? And how they are represented in both as donors and where the money is going. Do you have any thoughts about?
I mean, it's an interesting topic. I mean, first of all, I mean, I remember when my mom put me on the plane to the U.S., and Afro-Cuban mother and daughter took care of me until I got here. And when you think about Cuba and the racial background and all, think about the greatest artist that Cuba has given the world. His name is Wilfredo Lam. Okay, I mean that was a passionate guy, and I mean he did it in the 20s and the 30s. He was not white, so I mean Cuba. I mean he did come to Cuba and wasn't satisfied about the progress of blacks in the island, and that's when his whole the way that he painted and his whole focus changed with the whole Afro-Cuban situation. And you know, when you think of Afro-Cubans, they've been our stars. Celia Cruz, you know, Chucho Valdez, el padre de Chucho Valdez, Bebo. I mean, these guys were, I mean, you know, Nat King Cole would go to Cuba and sing in Spanish during the 50s. And I think, you know, have we done enough about Cuban blacks? Probably not. You know, we treat them like brothers. I myself, I can't tell the difference between a Cuban black and a Cuban white, but, you know, maybe the community can do more because there's so much talent there as it's been proven through the arts in our island and, you know, and coming to the United States and who these people were. You know, the Afro-Cuban experience. Chucho Valdez is doing an Afro-Cuban opera at the Arts Center in 2021. I mean, that's going to be amazing. Cecilia Valdez was about, you know, an Afro-Cuban. And, you know, there's never been an opera or an operetta done about the Afro-Cubans, and it's coming to the Arts Center in 2021.
I want to just change the subject for a second and just tell Tony, I see how sentimental you get with, you know, reliving kind of that story that you went through. And I really just want to take a moment to thank you and to thank everyone else in your generation that has channeled that for so much good and for giving back. And really, I mean, Miami is a perfect example of a city built by immigrants and mostly by Cubans who were so determined to make a better life for themselves. And so I see you get sentimental about it. And even though I didn't live it, I can't even imagine. And I just want to thank you.
Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you for saying that, Melissa. I'm going to ask another question. I'm going to ask two more questions and then we'll go into wrapping up and your closing remarks. So if you want to think about how we want to close this. But for me, I'd love to hear about how we're inspiring the next generation of philanthropists, because your story, Tony, is so inspiring. Melissa, you have 5 children. I have just the one and I struggle. How you do it, but how are you thinking about inspiring the next generation of philanthropists?
I mean, I could tell you that I look into my children's eyes every single day, and I want them to know how blessed they are and how much opportunities they've had because of everything that my parents and grandparents have gone through. And I think, you know, sometimes I tell myself, do they really understand, you know, because they have everything, but the way that I'm able to show them is to teach them about philanthropy, to teach them about giving back. I've taken all of my kids, except my 4-year-old, because she's too young, but they've all gone on mission trips for the last 3 years with myself and my husband. And we go to an orphanage in Honduras. And I think it's so important for them to understand that they have to be thankful and they have to give back. So I think if sharing my story, not only with my children, but platforms like this, platforms like Emerge Americas, which I'm extremely passionate about, and it's more tech and entrepreneurial focused, but it's also a form of philanthropy and giving back. And so I think it's just more discussions like this and teaching the next generation how important it is and what a difference it can make in your own community and the future of future generations as well.
Tony, what about you?
No, it's important that I've taught my 3 children, why I get involved and why I'm so passionate in all of these organizations because of my experience in life. People were there to receive me, whether in Tampa or at a boarding school or the church. They received me with open arms, and that's so important. But gosh, Melissa gave me a great idea. Those trips with the grandkids as they grow and all, and I mean, are so important to see how lucky they are and fortunate. And to see, and to really look at the world for what it is and how many people that are out there that are less fortunate and haven't had the opportunity. I can imagine if I had stayed back in Cuba, oh my gosh, I would probably, it would have been a waste of my life. And, so I feel fortunate to be in this country and be able to help others.
Thank you. You are both such inspirations. Your stories are so touching to the heart, full of corazón and full of promise. I think that everybody who's listening right now is really understanding not just our past, our present, but also our future potential and it's important to be able to leave all of these. So thank you so much for taking time to share and to really pave the way for others with your generosity and with your transparency of what you're doing for FIU and the broader community. So on behalf of Hispanics in Philanthropy, this is what we're doing. We are, bringing together people like you and making sure that they're visible to the broader community. So with that, I think I hand it back to Maite or to George. I would want to add that if others that are interested in this kind of work, please follow Casa Cuba. The work that's happening at Casa Cuba that Maria is doing is amazing and groundbreaking. And of course, Hispanics in Philanthropy, if you're interested in learning more about philanthropy in the Hispanic community, we're here for you. It's at HIPonline, hiponline.org. Get on our listserv, and we'd love to connect and share our resources. And thank you so much. And I am just looking at George to see if he wants to say a few words to close us up.
Thank you, Ana Mari.
Thank you,
Ana Mari. Thank you, FIU. Thank you, Tony.
Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you. I think with that, looks like we are closed. So have a great day.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you. Have a nice day. Bye. Thank you, Melissa. Thank you, Tony. We will be in touch with you.